Hey, this is Erica Koenig-Workman, and I'm coming to you from Studio 217, Ledge on the Edge, in a faraway land called Steveston. Anyways, I'm here to read to you Chapter 1 of After Christendom by Michael Warren Davis, and I'm reading the first chapter. The Final Generation is the title of the first chapter, okay? I figure this is going to take about 20 to 25 minutes to read. I've timed it and read it once before, just in a voice, just voice only, and I timed it. It's about 20-25 minutes. So thank you very much for joining me tonight. If you are with me live, I have no idea if anyone's here live. I'm not checking all that stuff right now. I'm just doing the reading. Okay, so here we go. I believe that we are living through the greatest catastrophe since the fall of Rome. Western civilization is dead. Christendom is no more. What we see around us now isn't Christian. It's not even a civilization. It's a mummified corpse, and even the wrapping bands are beginning to fray. Of course, the West could be reanimated someday. It died once already to its old pagan self. Then it rose again in the Middle Ages, made young in the faith. It may rise once more, but if it does, and that's a big if, it will look very little like it does today. Why? Because there's so little worth salvaging. Remember, politicians, journalists, and think tankers have a vested interest in our believing that victory is imminent, or at least possible. The populist right likes to talk about zombie Reaganism and its dead consensus. But this is only a way of disguising its own failures. The conservative elite will blame this or that faction for the right's failure to resist the left. But in reality, it is the right that has failed. It exists now only as a vast Ponzi scheme to enrich those politicians and journalists and think tankers, who then use their wealth and power to insulate themselves from the consequences. We have no need for conservatives. There is very little left to conserve. In any case, it wasn't conservatives who resurrected the West or saved the West from decadence and anarchy. Okay, you know what? I just realized, bit of a mistake. I just realized I'm reading the introduction. So we're going to go to chapter 1. Okay, here we go. Chapter 1. Oh, well, the final Christian generation. Okay. And they sacrificed their sons and daughters to the demons, and they poured out innocent blood, their sons and daughters' blood, in sacrifice to Canaan's idols, the land sick with murdered blood, the land polluted with these deeds. Psalm 105, 37-39. I will have no praying men to put a fear of death into men's hearts. H. Rider Haggard. Two very different quotes there. When folks talk about the end of Western civilization, usually they're talking about the paraphernalia, art, music, literature, architecture, politics, economics, and so forth. By the way, I don't call it paraphernalia to put it down. All of that stuff deserves to be mourned, and I mourn it. But I agree with Christopher Dawson, who asked back in the 1920s whether men are happier or wiser or better than they were in simpler states of society, and whether Birmingham or Chicago is to be preferred to medieval Florence. Are things culturally speaking any better today? William Butler Yeats was onto something, and most of us know it. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Deep down in our bones, we feel this is true. But who let loose the blood-dimmed tide? When did everything start to go wrong? I have a theory. During the wars of religion, 1552 to 1648, Europe's Catholics and Protestants slaughtered each other by the tens of thousands. Violence-driven disease and famine claimed the lives of millions more, and Europe was exhausted both physically and spiritually. In the late 1600s, the West's finest minds rallied together to blame those wars on religion itself. They set out to build a new political and cultural and intellectual order based solely on reason and natural law. We will call this project the Enlightenment. Okay. It failed. And it failed for the most honorable reason. It was too Christian. Its champions, quite literally, couldn't imagine a world without Christianity. Put it this way, pretend you've never heard of Christianity. Purge your mind of all of Jesus's teachings. Now think of a few good deeds that you think any rational person would recognize as good. Odds are you thought of something like giving money to a homeless person or volunteering at a soup kitchen. Surely you thought helping the poor and the needy is a safe bet. Wrong. In his masterpiece Dominion, Tom Holland talks about how Julian the Apostate, the last pagan emperor of Rome, wrote a letter to the priests of Cybele, complaining that they were failing in their duty to care for the poor. As Holland points out, Julian's letter would have baffled its readers. The cult of Cybele was completely monstrous and had no interest in the poor. You see, Julian was raised Christian, and it sounds as if he paid attention in Sunday school too, because really, not just the Cybeles, but any true pagan would have balked at his letter. None of antiquity's great philosophers ranked compassion very high on the list of virtues. In fact, many of them considered empathy a vice. Quote, "The strong do as they wish," unquote, said Thyclades. I might have got that pronunciation wrong. Okay, just bear with me. And the weak suffer what they must, he says. In fact, as David Bentley Hart points out in Atheist Delusions, the cornerstone of Nietzsche's philosophy is his belief that Christianity brought about a slave revolt in Western values, a new and sickly moral vision of reality, judging all things noble or base according to the same pernicious and vindictive categories of good and evil. Aristotle and Plato, Cicero and Seneca all took for granted the moral right of the elites to enslave and abuse the weak, the stupid, and the poor. Really, we have no idea what it means to be post-Christian, quote unquote. Like Julian, we have no idea how many of our most fundamental moral assumptions are grounded in the Christian religion. And it is very difficult to imagine what the world will look like when these foundations crumble. Take another example. Pro-life advocates often accuse the pro-choice crowd of being anti-science. After all, biologists have definitely proved that life begins at conception. These activists believe that if only they could get liberals to believe the science, liberals will see the error of their ways and abortion will be banned forever. Actually, the opposite is going to happen. Eventually, those liberals are going to say, all right, fine, life begins at conception, but who cares? It's just a bunch of cells. Let's just go ahead and kill it anyway. By that logic, the pro-lifer will respond, a newborn is just a larger clump of cells. The act of being born doesn't magically change a fetus into a baby. Hey, you're right, they'll say. It is basically the same thing. I think a mother should be able to kill her baby too, if she doesn't want it anymore. You don't believe me, dear reader? I don't blame you. But it's true. Abortion and infanticide are, and have been, commonplace in every non-Christian society. Scipio was the exception and Hannibal was the rule. From at least the 1600s until the last century, most rural Japanese families committed infanticide as a matter of course. The practice was known as mabiki, or thinning out, the same word farmers used for the purging of smaller plants from an overcrowded field. Once a father felt he had more children than he could afford to feed, he might smother his newborn. It was common for poorer families to kill 2 or 3 children this way. Japanese infanticide was unusual because it was mostly boys who were killed. Most cultures have preferred to snuff out their girls. In the Icelandic saga of Gunnlaugr the Serpent Tongue, a husband named Thorstein tells his wife, Jorkfrid, quote, "So you are with child. If you shall bear a girl, it shall be exposed, but if a boy, it shall be raised." Thorstein sounds a lot like Hilarion, a certain first-century Greek businessman. All we know about Hilarion comes from a letter he wrote to his pregnant wife. He wrote, quote, "If it is a boy, keep it. If it is a girl, discard it." Unquote. Lovely. But he was no anomaly. Most ancient Greeks took the same attitude toward child-rearing. So did the Romans. They were particularly callous toward feeble offspring. Quote, "Unnatural progeny we destroy." Unquote. Seneca explained, "We drown even children who at birth are weak and abnormal." Unquote. Nor was Hilarion an anomaly among civilized middle-class Hellenics. As Rodney Stark has observed, Seneca regarded the drowning of children at birth as both reasonable and commonplace. Tacitus charged that the Jewish teaching that it is a deadly sin to kill an unwanted child was but another of their own sinister and revolting practices. Both Plato and Aristotle recommended infanticide as legitimate state policy. The 12 tablets, the earliest known Roman legal code, written about 450 BCE, permitted a father to expose any female infant and any deformed or weak male infant. When Christians today talk about infanticide, as we usually think of demon worshippers like the Carthaginians or the Aztecs, diabolists sacrificing their children to their demonic gods. And we mustn't forget these dreadful rites, especially now that Satanists are demanding their First Amendment right to perform ritual abortions. Yet, as G.K. Chesterton points out, these demon worshippers pay a perverse honor to children. They seem to know what babies are worth. They sacrifice their young precisely because they see the worth. They see their worth. They're like Abraham before the angel stayed his hand. Now, I don't know if that's a fair comparison. I'm just going to pause there and say that, but I'm just reading on here, okay? But the Spartan attitude is far more common. They took their weak children deep into the woods, where their screams couldn't be heard, and left them to be eaten by wild animals. Even today, the Chinese commit infanticide on an industrial scale. Really, female infanticide is a pillar of Chinese culture. Journalists blame the practice on the Communist Party's one-child policy. Just lost my place here. Okay. Yeah. But that's only a small part of it. Chinese parents have been murdering baby girls for thousands of years, a form of mabiki meant to conserve resources for male children who can help their fathers in the fields. Female infanticide is still widely practiced on China's rural provinces, in their provinces, with tacit approval from the Communist Party. Just shifting here, I'll let it get comfortable here. Now, let's see, where was I? Sorry, I think I lost my place here. Hang on. Okay, there you are. Yeah. This is what a non-Christian society looks like. It's what the West looked like before the advent of Christianity, and it's what the West will look like soon, once the last vestiges of Christendom have been stripped away. Mothers and fathers will kill their newborn babies, simply as a matter of convenience, and they'll feel no shame, none whatsoever. It's not just the babies either. It's the elderly, the sick, the deformed, the poor. Outside of Christendom, their lives have always been disposable, and they will be once again here in the West. Mark my words. We'll snuff out their lives without a second thought. You don't believe me? Dear reader, you can't imagine your mothers and fathers, your sisters and brothers, your friends committing such evil deeds? I don't blame you. But imagine going back in time, 100 years. Imagine trying to explain modern politics to your great-great-grandmother. Every woman has the right to abort her pregnancy up to the moment of birth, and old people can end their lives through physician-assisted suicide. Even if the old people don't want to kill themselves, sometimes doctors will do it anyway. Doctors will also kill you if you have cancer or depression or autism. Just ask. Or they'll also cut off a little boy's gonads if he wants, and the boy's parents can go to jail if they try to stop him. If you could have told anyone in the 1920s that this is what America would look like in 100 years, they would have called you mad. If you'd said that your own great-grandchildren would be the ones urging these doctors to kill babies, murder old people, and mutilate children's genitals, they would have biffed you right in the eye. It's offensive, it's disgusting, it's unthinkable, but it's true. Name a single vice that was popular in the late Roman Empire, and you'll see that it's already making a comeback in the 21st century. West. Slavery? Our economy is powered by slaves. In countries such as China and Pakistan, that was the whole point of outsourcing. Pederasty? After normalizing transgenderism, the left's intellectual vanguard is preparing to do the same for minor attracted persons, or MAPS. Scholars, psychiatrists, and legislators are already demanding that the age of consent be lowered dramatically so that adults can legally have sex with children. Blood sports, rioting, looting, assault, and murder are now common in our major cities. At first, we pretended that they were political protests, but for many, this is a form of recreational violence, and the government does nothing to stop it. No one really cares. Most alarming is the return of paganism. For the most part, conservative Christians believe the West is drifting toward atheism. I wish that were the case. The void left by Christianity will not remain empty for long. Witchcraft, sorcery, and Satanism will rush in to fill the vacuum. Even today, woodlands across the country are being used by covens of witches and diabolists. I've witnessed it myself. God help me, I've taken part in these rituals. This is the world we live in now. As bad as things seem now, they will be infinitely worse in a century or two. Ours is the most perverse or degraded society in human history. Excuse me. Ours is not the most perverse or degraded society in human history. It's not even close. And remember, that perversity has nothing to do with whether a society is civilized or not. Saint Basil speaks of orgies in which men eat until they vomit and then begin the next course. They eat until they vomit again. The next course is served over and over and over again until the sun begins to rise. This, mind you, is very much an upper-class pastime. You have to imagine the hedonist discussing Thales or reciting Horace while gorging themselves. Then he toddles home past all the wailing newborns who have been left on the sidewalk to die. Before before sodomizing the 10-year-old boy he bought at the slave market that morning. Then is a quick trip to the bathhouse before watching the Christians burned or devoured by panthers in the Colosseum. This was the greatest civilization the world had ever seen. Yes, things could get much worse, and they will. Mark my words, in 100 years or so, your great-grandchildren will be the ones murdering their own babies, having sex with children, casting spells on their enemies, and killing poor people for fun. That may seem like disgusting slander. It is disgusting. But it's not slander. I'm tempted to say it won't be their fault. Because, in a sense, they won't know any better. This kind of behavior is all too normal in non-Christian civilizations. Study after study shows that within a generation, and for the first time in 17 centuries, Christians will be a minority here in the West. This is not too distant. This is our not too distant future. Either you get that or you don't. And if you don't, you're part of the problem. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you. I'm not sure you'd like to help. I'm sure you'd like to help, rather. I'm sure you'd like to help. But look, when the Titanic had struck an iceberg and half the ship is underwater, if you're trying to figure out where to get supper once we dock in New York, you're not helping. Okay, there isn't going to be any supper tonight, my friends. That is why we must not idolize political or ideological movements and think they are going to save us. That goes for the left, of course, but it also goes for the right. Conservatism, populism, Christian nationalism, integralism, the lot. If they don't take into account the total collapse of Western civilization, excuse me, I have to back up here. It doesn't matter how clever their schemes for the future may be. If they don't take into account the total collapse of Western civilization, they're essentially useless. In fact, they can be worse than useless if they ply us with false hopes. False hopes are servants of the enemy. They're his fifth column, which he plants deep within our own hearts and minds. They lull us into a false sense of security. They make us lazy and complacent. Then, when he's ready to attack, they throw open the gates. Throughout the rest of this book, I'll be suggesting ways to prepare for the coming dark age, but I'll consider my job well done if I can sell you on just one point. The dark age is coming. More likely than not, it's already here. So that's the conclusion, the end of chapter 1 of After Christendom by Michael Warren Davis. Thank you very much for listening and being with me. If you're here live, I don't know who's here, but I did message a few people before I went on. So thank you so much for listening, and see you again next time. Okay, bye for now.